I'm so happy to be here and very glad you're here too. And I'm really glad to talk about and give a reading from my book, The Kosambi Intrigue, A Tale in the Time of the Buddha. And I thought that just to begin with, we could talk about India just for a moment and say, if we know anything about India, one thing we know is that it's crowded, right? Mm-hmm. And a second thing that we know about India is that it is big. So to put that in comparison or contrast with the United States, because I think that brings it home to us, India's population is about 4 times the population here. They have 1.2 billion people. They live in a territory that is less than half the size of the United States, space-wise. So,
crowded.
Yeah. So it's crowded. And another thing that we know about India is that it's an ancient civilization, and a lot less crowded. Back at the time when about the time when I wrote this, in the Buddha's era, a lot less crowded. So what I wanted to do is to show you where this takes place. This takes place in the area where the Buddha lived. He lived in northeastern India, or at least where he worked. He wasn't born there, but we won't go into all of that. And he was mainly in the Ganges. Here's the Ganges River, going up here. The river Ganges, going up here. Its headwaters are up in the Himalayas. Mm-hmm. And so coming right down here, and the area that we are going to be talking about is right around what is the modern city of Allahabad. Mm-hmm. And it's right in the juncture of the Ganges River and another major river called the Yamuna. Now, the town that we are focusing on, actually it was a city, a huge major metropolis at the time, is called Kosambi. Right now it's a teeny little inconspicuous little town, and it's on the banks of the Yamuna, just not too far from the confluence of the Yamuna and the Ganges. So it's right over in this area, down in here, Allahabad, right in there. So here's the area, northeast India, where the Buddha really taught, where he walked, where he taught all those years. So this is where this is going to be focusing. And as I said, it's a lot less crowded at that time. So I might ask, why is it that I wrote the book? It seems to me that might be of interest. And I will say that I wrote it, I actually didn't want to write it. I was on a retreat, a meditation retreat, with a man named Lee Brasington, and this was back in 2008 or 2009. And he was giving a talk one night, and he was talking about from the Buddhist scriptures. And I knew the scripture he was talking about. And he was talking about consciousness and lots of stuff. But I knew that scripture, and in that scripture, there was a reference to a monk named Sati. And in the scripture, Sati gets blasted for not having a proper understanding. Now, I won't go into all of this, of how it was blasted. I think there's a lot of later editorial inserts here. But I realized, and they kept repeating, "You're a son of a fisherman." In ancient India, and later as it developed even more strongly in the caste system, fishermen were outcasts. Because it doesn't mention that in the scripture, but this is the case. So in other words, they were saying, you're just from an outcast, a non-caste, not from even the caste, and you just don't understand what this is all about. And I remember sitting there, and as Lee Brasington was talking on, I was thinking, this is bigotry. It's like, so I decided, something needs to be done about that. Something needs to be said about that. And then the thought came up, well, why not write a book? I said, that's nuts. Why would I want to write a book about that? And it kept coming to, why not write a novel? It just came from nowhere. And I said, I don't want to do that. I said, I don't want to do all of that research. What do I know about ancient Indian culture? So the the issue was I wrestled with it back and forth, and not for very long. By the end of that evening, I decided I was going to write a novel, and Sati was going to be a key character in it. So that's what happened, and that's how this came to be. So that's how I wrote it. And then I will say what I tried to show. What I was trying to show is that these people lived in a remote time and a remote place. But you know what? They were human beings, just like we are. So I was trying to show that there isn't that much difference. Even the culture is different. These are human beings. And that's so it's really relevant, even though we tend to think, a book about ancient India, I mean, what do I know about that? It's really relevant. I wrote in the vernacular, American, English vernacular, because my sense was they spoke in their own vernacular. That's how they talked to each other. I didn't try to make it any, besides I don't even know what their vernacular was, but I didn't try to make it stilted in any way. So it really comes across as human beings talking to each other, as they had to have done. And I will say that this novel, the Kosambi Intrigue, is one of the first novels since Siddhartha, Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. Very, very little has been written. Historical fiction has been written about ancient India. I did a good deal of research for this book, and it is based on historical fact. The Kosambi Intrigue. It focuses on a schism in the Buddha's order as a result of political intrigue. Political intrigue that, according to the historical text, happened in the monastery where I have Sati living. But I think it wasn't just in the monastery. I think it was bigger than that. When you read a little bit about the era, you see there was a king in Kosambi. This was the capital of a kingdom right there. And the king was very much against the Buddha. And he was a very volatile man. And I think it was actually an intrigue between individuals in the monastery and the court and the king's policies. And that's what I've written. That's the story that I have made. But again, the basis of it, although I've got the court into it, and that wasn't in the historical text, as I put it, the basis of it proceeded and opened just as it did in the historical text. So it starts from a little incident, which I'm going to read now, and it becomes a huge issue in Kosambi. It finally embroils the whole town. It embroils the kingdom. It becomes a real crisis. I'll ask if there's any questions just right now before I start to read.